Ladies and gentlemen, we are now opening the academic lecture series by listening to the remarks given by Director of University of Mataram that will be represented by the expert staff of Vice Rector for Academic. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Ahmad Junaidi, PhD.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Greetings of peace to everyone. Magandang umaga, selamat pagi, salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. The peace be unto all of us here this morning. The Philippines and Indonesia share the same religious expressions within our daily lives. We start our events, we start our day by thanking the God for bestowing us with the blessings so that we can meet and organize our lives better day by day. So I invite us to thank the God for our presence today. I remember when I was in the Philippines, the event starts with the prayers of all religions. So it's all very inclusive. So I hope that you will be here today feeling included in all of the details of our events for the days to come, and hopefully you felt very welcome on the days that you have spent here. I acknowledge the presence of the Dean of the Faculty of Food Technology and Agro-Industry, Dr. Ririn Handayani, and also the presence of the Secretary of the Corporations and Enterprise of the Faculty of Education, and also the presence of all the faculty members or the university members here. I am giving the speech not because I am the representative of the rector per se, but because I've been to the Philippines as the representative of the university. I stayed there for 1 week, and then I gave lectures, I met the students, and I was very welcomed by the warmth and the friendships that was given by the host, the Central Bicol State University of Agriculture. So now we hope that we are giving the same amount and maybe exceeding the welcome, the warmth of friendship, and the openness, and also the service to the representatives of the Cbsua. So I acknowledge the presence of the Dean Marilyn Balderas, the Dean of the Agriculture and Natural Resources, and also the head of the Agriculture of Science in Agriculture, Dr. Emma Harsia, and also the lecturer of the English program at the Faculty of the College of Development Education, and also the beloved students. So now we have 3 students here, and the rest are still preparing for the cultural night. So I invite everyone here to give a very warm applause for everyone, for the representatives. I'd like to deliver a little bit. The opening remark can be some kinds of information that I can share here. Our relationship with Cbsua goes back 3 years ago. It's now the 3rd year that we're doing the International Credit Transfer Program. Picture this as some kinds of MBKM in which our students study in the Philippines and the Philippine students study in Indonesia. So the International Credit Transfer Program will run yearly, and we hope that more students are joining the program. So I asked the students of the University of Mataram, would you be interested in maybe studying for 1 semester in the Philippines? Yeah? Okay. And then I hope that most students can be involved in this with the cooperation for all the faculties, because all the faculties are invited to join this program. And as special message from the rector. We have a very big goal of succeeding and then also securing in a partnership a formal agreement for next year, the joint degree. So imagine this, 2 years you will be studying in Indonesia, and then for the next 2 years you will be studying in the Philippines. That's a joint degree. So picture that, and if you are still in the second semester, you can join the International Credit Transfer Program. But I hope that we can feel the pride of the university having a joint degree program, because that will be the first, it will be historical. So I invite us to work together here to make that happen. And in the upcoming cultural night, which is happening this evening, we will seal some kinds of deals. Yeah? So I hope that the deals will not only be on paper, but translate and manifest into the real actions of Cbsua and Unram working together to make the lives better for all the nations, the great people of the Philippines and the great people of Indonesia. And in relation to today's lecture, the first is Dr. Marilyn, you will be speaking about the analysis of the pollens foraged by the stingless bees in the Bicol region. And also Dr. Darrell will be speaking about how to make the sustainable future through the higher education in the ASEAN. Please correct me if I'm making a wrong detail about that, but I believe that that's really what we want to have, sustainability in all of our practices. And also we understand the importance of the stingless bees in our food production and food sustainability. So I want us to have this lecture, even though we expect more people to come. But one thing in the performance industry said, it doesn't matter how many people come to your events. What matters the most is how much you give to the people who come. So I hope that this will be beneficial for every one of us, representing the universities, representing the faculties. I welcome all the speakers, I welcome all the audience, and I hope you will get the best benefit. And by this, we open this academic lecture series formally now. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Syosma bolos.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you to Mr. Ahmad Junaidi, PhD, for the opening remarks. Once again, please give a round of applause for Mr. Ahmad Junaidi, PhD. And moving on to the next agenda, that is souvenir handover from University of Mataram to Central Bicol State University of Agriculture. And I would like to invite Dr. Santi Farmasari as the head of English study program, and also our keynote speakers, Dr. Marilyn Balderas and Dr. Daryl Ocampo, to come forward for the souvenir handover. All right, the first souvenir handover is from University of Mataram to our keynote speaker, Dr. Marilyn B. Balderas from Cbsua, the Philippines. All right, thank you. And once again, please give a round of applause for both University of Mataram and Cbsua Philippines. All right, ladies and gentlemen, before we proceed, we will hold a photo session. To all keynote speakers, distinguished guests, and participants, please kindly stand up and gather at the center so we can hold the photo session. Minta tolong kepada para undangan dan partisipan yang hadir supaya kita bisa berfoto bersama. Mungkin bisa bergeser lebih ke tengah supaya semuanya masuk ke kamera. Alright, everyone be ready. I will count down from 3, 2, 1. Alright, once again, 3, 2, 1. Okay, maybe you can pause for L letter, L for Lombok. Okay, everyone be ready in 1, 2, 3. Once again, 1, 2, 3. All right, thank you very much. Once again, one more pose. One Cbsua. Okay. Okay. I will count down from 3, 2, 1. Once again, 3, 2, 1. Okay. All right. Thank you very much for your cooperation. All right, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, here is the most awaited agenda, that is the academic lecture series. We are now going to listen the first keynote speakers that will be delivered by Dr. Manuel B. Balderas as the Dean of College of Agriculture and Natural Resources, Cbsua. And the first keynote speaker will be moderated by Dr. Hewan Madesriasih, PhD. And to Dr. Hewan Madesriasih, PhD, and the first keynote speaker, please kindly to take a seat on the stage. Okay, for the moderator, the moment is yours.
Thank you very much for the Master of Ceremony, the Honorable Rector of the University of Mataram, Vice Rector, Deans, and Head of the International Office Affair, all speakers in today's general lecture, students and guests attending this general lecture. Selamat pagi, salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Magandang umaga to all delegates from Cbsua Philippines. It is very grateful that today we will get something new that will add to our scientific knowledge. Dr. Marilyn Balderas from Central Bicol State University of Agriculture, Philippines, will deliver a lecture entitled Analysis of Pollens Forage by Stingless Bees, Tetragonula birolfries in Bicol region, Philippines. There will be 1 hour lecture according to the timetable given to me, and then followed by 30 minutes question and answer session. Before we start, I would like to inform you all a brief CV or curriculum vitae of Dr. Marilyn Balderas. Dr. Marilyn Balderas got a Bachelor in Science in Agriculture in 1990 and Master of Science in 1999. Dr. Balderas obtained her PhD degree in 2012 in Plant Science with a dissertation entitled Pollen Sources of Stingless Bee, Tetragonula biroi, in relation to bloom pattern in Cameroon Sur. She has published a lot of papers, and her latest publication was on pollen spectrum and phenology of stingless bee, Tetragonula biroi freeze plants. She also involved in various projects in which she has served as a project leader. And Dr. Balderas currently is the Dean of the College of Agriculture and Natural Resources, University of the Philippines, Los Banos. So everyone, to optimize the time, please welcome Dr. Marilyn Balderas. Time is yours.
Thank you very much for such kind introduction, Dr. Madi. And of course, before I start, I would like to acknowledge also the presence of the different vice rectors, deans and vice deans, and the different heads of the different programs, faculty, and students of the Universitas Mataram. Of course, Dr. Junaide, our colleague, Dr. Darrell, and also Dr. Emma Harsha. So, in behalf of our university, the Central Bicol State University of Agriculture, and also in the name of our president, Dr. Alberto Enaperi, we are so happy, we are so glad for the warm welcome given to us by this university. I hope that collaboration with this university will flourish for a long, long time. So my dear colleagues also in education, so I would like to present part of my dissertation actually, entitled, my presentation is about the analysis of pollens foraged by stingless bee, or stingless bees Tetragonula biroi in the Bicol region, Philippines. Now, by the way, this kind of research is actually being done by the university because the stingless bees or Tetragonula biroi is one of our flagship commodity. So this research is very important because it enhances also our knowledge on the stingless bees. And this also helps in promoting the stingless bees as part of our agri-ecotourism initiatives of the university. Okay, may I ask for the presentation? Okay. So next slide, please. So that is the Philippines. So we are divided by 12 regions, political regions, and I do not have any, okay, so the Bicol region, Philippines is located in the southeastern part of Luzon, and which is called the Region 5 or the Bicol region. Now, our region is divided into 6 provinces, wherein 4 provinces are located in the mainland of Luzon, while two other provinces are located are actually island provinces. So our region are visited by typhoons, 20 or more typhoons every year, and 14 of that will pass the Bicol region. And out of 14, there could be 3 to 5 strong typhoons that hit our region. So our region is also has two distinct seasons. We have the dry and the wet season. Next slide, please. Okay, so that is the area map of the Camarines Sur province. So as you can see, we have the 6 provinces. We have the Camarines Norte, Camarines Sur, Albay, Sorsogon. So those are the mainland provinces. Well, the 2 island provinces are Catanduanes and Masbate. So we are in Camarines Sur, the heart of Bicol. So Pili, and as you can see on the map, our region is characteristically mountainous, sloping topography, but in certain parts there are also flat or lowland areas. Okay, next slide, please. So the Bicol region is rich in biodiversity because of its rolling and hilly mountainous topography, as I mentioned a while ago. We have a total land area of 17,632.5 square kilometers. And 50% of the area in Bicol region is agricultural, while 30% are grassland, 13% are forest land, and the remaining areas are devoted to miscellaneous uses. So it could be residential, commercial, and some agricultural production. Then the Philippine flora is at least 13,500 species, and since our university is located at the foot of Mount Isarog, so 13 species of plants could be found in Mount Isarog. Now, by the way, our region also has 6 volcanoes. 2 are active. So one is located in Albay, the famous Mayon volcano with its perfect cone, and the other one is located in Bulusan, Sorsogon. Now, Mount Isarog, Mount Iriga are actually located in Camarines Sur and are considered inactive volcanoes. The other 2, Mount Malinao and Mount Masaraga, are also located in Albay and all inactive volcanoes. So we have 6 volcanoes in total in the Bicol region, and 2 are active volcanoes. Next, please. So we are also rich and diverse floral resources, but I've noticed that Indonesia is more diverse and are very rich in floral resources because as we have our tour in North Lombok and even in West Lombok, we noticed that the vegetation is so thick and not that kind of vegetation is seldom seen in the Philippines and also in our place. So we have also warm and favorable climate, and this climate are also very important elements for beekeeping. We have different native species of bees in the Bicol region, and these are the Apis cerana, as you can see in the picture, in the first picture. The second one is the Apis dorsata. This is the wild bees. And we have the other one is the Tetragonola beroi, or our own stingless bees. Tetragonola beroi, by the way, is native in the Bicol region. So this is found first in our region, way back in 2007. Then another species, it is an introduced species that is also being cultured by few beekeepers in the region, is the Apis mellifera. So as we all know, Apis mellifera is the honeybee that produces a large amount of honey. That's why they are called the commercial honeybee. So Apis cerana, they are also being cultured in the region by few beekeepers, but because they have sting, so majority of our beekeepers shift into what we call as stingless beekeeping. Next slide, please. So why stingless beekeeping? What is our purpose of keeping the stingless bees, or go into what we called as meliponiculture? So Tetragonella beroi recently captured the interest of our local beekeepers because it has no sting. So it is safe to handle by even the elderly. Usually, our retired government officials would engage on beekeeping. This could be easily manipulated by housewives, by the youth, and even the all members of the family could participate in stingless beekeeping. And recently, we recognize the potential of this species for commercialization, especially in the production of honey, propolis, as well as of pollen. Another reason is that feral colonies of stingless bees are abundant in our locality. So that is why hive manipulation, which we normally teach to our local beekeepers, can be also learned easily by them. Another reason is that stingless bees are polylactic feeders. So they are known to forage on many different kinds of flowering plants. So more than 100 of taxa of flowering plants can be found also in our place. And in fact, I have identified more than 100 plants that are also visited by stingless bees. Another reason is that beekeeping has become it is an added feature in some agri-ecotourism farms in Bicol and the Visayas, which we called militourism. So in our university, we actually encourage a cooperative, farmers cooperative, to engage not only in agricultural production, but as well as to engage also in beekeeping, because we all know that bees are a very good pollinators. So if they keep the bees also in their farm, they have also an increase in production. So that is one of our aim also in studying or conducting researches, promoting this kind of bees to enhance also our agricultural endeavors. And the main objective of this research is to know the different food sources of the bees that would be also guide us in selecting sites that would be favorable for meliponiculture. Next slide, please. Okay, so we have here the Tetragonella beroi. Locally, we call it kiyot, lokot, kiwot. Other locality would call it lukutan or libog. Those are our local terminologies. I do not know where the local term also for the Trigona clypiaris and sapiens of Indonesia. But our Tetragonella beroi is known as kiyot, lukot, or kiwot. So our Tetragonella is a little bit bigger than the Indonesian Trigona, as we have seen it in our tour. The other day with Dr. Wahid in North Lombok. And in fact, I have noticed that Trigona clypiaris is actually gentle than our Tetragonella beroi, because our Tetragonella beroi is more rather aggressive kind of stingless bees. And once an alien would visit or a people would visit the colonies, so they would also come and have their, it's not actually sting, but they bite your hair, they pull your hair. So they love to pull your hair as well as your eyelashes. So they are also, they hate the black color. That's why we wear a white color for when we do our manipulation of the hive. So our stingless bee also is also belongs to the order Hymenoptera, class Apidae, tribe Meliponini, and also the genus Tetragonella. So our Tetragonella beroi are being hived in. Normally we started using the half coconut shell, as you can see in the picture, because coconut shell are very abundant in our region. So we use it to hive the Tetragonella beroi. Then recently, farmers also shift to the hiving the Tetragonella beroi in boxes, just like what we also saw in North Lombok. So we have actually similar way of hiving or manipulating the stingless bees. Although we have learned from our visit a new way of obtaining the pollen. Because in our locality, we usually extract the pollen by means of pressing the honey pots. But in North Lombok, you have to suck the pollen pods, the honey pots, thereby preventing destroying all the pollen pods. And that's actually a best practice that we could share also to our local beekeepers and to the university. Okay, next slide, please. So the objectives of this research is first to identify the flowering plants suitable for meliponiculture. Number two, to determine the bloom pattern of the flowering plants and determine the foraging behavior of Tetragonella beroi on these different floral species. Number four, to identify the pollen types collected in the colonies of Tetragonella beroi and their value to stingless bees. And number five is to determine the relationship between the diversity of forage pollens and the bloom pattern of the plants. Okay, so as to the materials and methods, so I have to establish the colonies of the stingless bees in 4 selected sites. So we divided the 4 selected sites into lowland and upland ecosystem. So newly split colonies of the stingless bees has to be established first in these different areas. We have the lowland and the upland ecosystem. So after establishing them for about 3 months, so we need to identify the flowering plants that are in the vicinity of the identified meliponari. We call it meliponari instead of the apiary. So what I did is to establish a 300-meter pinology transect that crisscross on the colonies. And all those plants that fall within the 300-meter radius are actually identified. So we really have to examine all those flowering plants if they are really visited by the stingless bees. Then aside from that, we also observe, we also count, identify the number of blooming plants per month. And afterwards, I did a pollen sampling wherein we conducted qualitative and quantitative pollen analysis. And the last part of the methodology is we need to assess the pollen richness. Next slide, please. So this is, okay. Next slide. Okay. So that's how we perform acetylysis. So in the university, we still have this equipment. So it is an old equipment, centrifuges, but it is very versatile because it could accommodate a lot of tubes. No? So it's still functional. So I need to do acetylysis to prepare the pollen for microscopic examination. So when you do acetylysis using the acetylysis fluid, it reveals the pattern of the outer wall or the egg sign of the pollen grains. And that is the basis for my identification. So initially, I have very difficulty in identifying the pollen because that is not actually my major field of specialization. I am a plant pathologist, so I used to identify fungi. No? That's my specialization, mycology. But I really have to do this one. So what I did is for me to identify the different pollens from the acetylyzed pollen is to make an acetylysis also of the flowers. So I have to get the different pollens from those different flowering plants in the vicinity or those that covered by 300-meter radius. So I do twice acetylysis. Acetylysis of the flower of the pollen from the fresh flowers and also acetylysis of the pollens collected by Tetragonella beroi. So I performed this in the laboratory facility of our research division following the method of Earthman modified by the Dartmouth College electron microscope facility. Next slide, please. Okay, so the pollen analysis is done by counting 100 pollen grains per sample using the hemocytometer. So the percentage of occurrence of pollen and its corresponding value to the stingless bees were derived from the Lebuix et al. In 1978. So I have to classify the pollen as to predominant pollen, wherein more than 45% of the pollen grains are counted. It is classified as secondary pollen if I was able to count 16 to 45% of the total pollen grains counted. Important minor pollen if 3 to 15% of the total pollen grains are counted, and minor pollen if it is less than 3% of the total pollen grains counted. Next slide, please. Okay, for the statistical analysis, I made a simple linear regression analysis using free statistics software version, and we analyzed also the pollen richness based on the estimate A software by Colwell in 2005. Next slide. Okay, so for the results and discussion, so based on my research, plants visited by Tetragonella beroi are, they visited 49 families, 100 genera, and about 121 plant species. And out of those 100 genera, 35% are herbs. So they are the most commonly visited by stingless bees, and probably these are also the most common plants that are found on those beekeeping sites. 31% are trees, 20% are shrub, 7% vines, and 7% are palms. Next slide. So out of those number, 111 species of flowering plants are identified in the lowland ecosystem, while 42% are identified in the upland ecosystem. And out of those different family, Leguminosae are actually the highest number in terms of species visited by the stingless bees, followed by Asteraceae. Then Palmae, there are 8 species that are being found in those areas, while the rest of the different plant families are represented by 1 to 5 species of flowering plants. Next slide. So as to the bloom pattern, I have found out that 53% of those flowering plants bloom all year round. So meaning they are non-seasonal. They can bloom throughout the year. So it provides food sources for the stingless bees, not only the pollen but as well as the nectar sources. And 32% are seasonal, so they will only flower during May, during the dry season. And while some of those plants are, we call they have 15% of it has intermittent flowering, meaning there are flowering that the bloom period would start at February to May, and another season, another blooming period would also notice around September, August to September. And as to the number of species flowered per month in the lowland ecosystem, you will notice that there is an increase in the bloom pattern or in the number of species that are visited by the stingless bees. So normally it started from January to May, and the peak of flowering is actually during the month of March. So it has an increase in the number of species of plants that flowered, and it has also something to do with the number of plants that are being foraged by the stingless bees for pollen and nectar sources. Well, during June, this is actually May to June is actually the start of our wheat season. So many of, only a very few of the plants flowered during this month. So the intermittent flowering would really start in July and August. That's why there is also an increase in the bloom pattern. While from September to December, which is actually our rainy season, and this is also the time that we are also visited by the strong typhoon. So there is a decrease in the number of plants that blooming during that particular months. Okay. So as I mentioned a while ago, please the next slide, please. Okay, January to May is recorded with the highest number of blooming plants. So in fact, we identified 81 to 91 species, and the peak of blooming period is actually during March. So this is what we called as the honey flow season because it coincided with the blooming of many seasonal species. And we noticed also that during this period, the stingless bee also showed very active foraging. So as mentioned a while ago, we call this the honey flow season because this is coincided with the many plants that are blooming on that particular month. So the tendency of the stingless bees is to forage. No? They are very efficient in foraging. They are so industrious in foraging. So they are an opportunistic feeder or forager actually. So whatever pollen sources, whatever nectar sources that are present, they would come back to that flower. So we have observed that they have what we call as floral fidelity. No? So that is also common on stingless bees. When they see to it that the flower, that in a particular species, they have what we call as, they can obtain a more floral rewards, meaning they can obtain a lot of pollen and nectar, they will visit that flower. No? If that flowering plant would bloom for 2 days, so they will visit that for 2 days. And with other species are not visited at all. So June to September, we have the secondary flowering wherein 77 to 83 species are also identified, but this is the start of the dirt period, meaning this is the time that the bees could not go out to look for the pollen plants or nectar sources because it is rainy season. So they cannot get out of their hive, and sometimes if the colonies are weak, so some of the colonies died also because of the continuous rains during that period. So that is why one of our initiative also is to teach those beekeepers that not to divide the colony during the rainy season because it would be very difficult for the stingless bee to forage, to look for pollen and nectar sources. So we advise them to split the colonies, multiply their colonies during the dry season or the start of the blooming period. As mentioned also by Dr. Wahid yesterday, you were able to get to split the colony within 3 months. So that is also what we observe in our Tetragonella beroi during the dry season. But if it is wet season, as much as possible, we avoided splitting the colonies. So October to December has the least number of blooming plants with 69 to 70 species. Also, the continuous dirt period for the bees and wet season are considered stressful for the stingless bees. Okay, next slide, please. So I'll just pass this one. So those are just some of the few plant species that are being foraged by the stingless bees. So I think some of these plants are also common in Indonesia. Some of that are considered, we considered as weed species, say for example, the Bidens pelosa or the battle brush plant, the kapok or the Ciba pentandra, which we considered one of the dominant pollen sources of the stingless bees because it flowered from December to January. So during flowering of the Ciba pentandra, we call this the cotton tree plant, no? And local we call this kapok. So they frequently visited this Ciba pentandra during December to January until February. So citrus species is also different species of citrus loved by the stingless bees because aside from the pollen, they were able to get nectar also from the citrus plant. So indicated there are the forage value to Tetragonella beroi as well as the flowering period. Next slide, please. Still, we have some of the few identified species or plants that are visited by the stingless bees. Next slide. Okay, so majority of those identified species are cultivated species. So they are being taken care of by the local beekeepers, by farmers. Some of them are just abundant in the backyard. And some species also are feral or weeds. And what I have found out in my research is that there is a similarity in the species composition between the lowland and the upland ecosystem, although a few number of flowering plants are found in the upland ecosystem. That might be probably with, it has something to do with the slope, with the topography. And okay, that variation will be also attributed to the differences in the elevation and the cropping practices. So we have also different cropping practices in the upland ecosystem and also with the lowland ecosystem. And the plants that are also being cultivated in the upland is also very minimal compared with the lowland ecosystem. Okay, so as to the foraging behavior, so I observed this partially in my research. So I have noticed that the effective foraging distance of our Tetragonella beroi is from 50 to 150 meters from the hive. Although the Tetragonella beroi can forage up to a kilometer distance, but in my observation, the effective foraging distance is 50 to 150 meters. So they would really explore those areas, They would really explore those areas for the pollen and nectar sources. It's because if they go farther, so they will consume a lot of nectar because nectar is the carbohydrate source of the bee, so it fueled their flight. So if we'll go farther, so there is also a more consumption of the nectar. So that's why we, as based on my research and also the research of some of our faculty, the effective foraging distance is between 50 to 150 meters. So we encourage also our beekeepers to plant flowering plants on those near the hive to become less stressful for the bee in foraging for food. So I've noticed that the active foraging is on the dry season. So these are noted in the morning with peak at 8 to 9:30 in the morning. And it has also noticed that during this particular time of the day, it has also recorded the highest number of the returning foragers. So they are very active looking for pollen and nectar during this period. And as I've mentioned before a while ago, floral fidelity or flower constancy is also observed in the stingless bees. And because of that, the kind of pollen that gathered usually in the morning are considered unifloral. In fact, 95% when I examine the pollen that is being foraged by the bee in the corbicular or the hind legs of the honeybees, I've noticed that 95% of that pollen belongs to only one species during this 8 to 9:30 in the morning. So that is why unifloral can be also observed in Tetragonella beroi. Okay, so this is just the average number of returning foragers observed at 30-minute interval during the dry season. So I only took the month, the March to April, and with season September to October. So you will notice that the active foraging is actually from 8 to 9:30 in the morning. And going to the afternoon, the number of foragers also decrease. But you will notice that there is also a peak of foraging about 11 to 11:30. So I have observed that in my colonies that is being placed under the coconut trees or the coconut plantation. So I've noticed that if the colonies are placed under the coconut plantation, so they would really forage for bees even during 11 to 11:30. and the site is also shaded. So those weeds that are found on in the coconut plantation or under coconut plantation are also being foraged by the stingless bees. So they are also active during this midday in the colonies that are being placed under the coconut plantation. Next slide, please. So as to the pollen analysis, so the stingless bees collected pollens from the 69% of the total number of plants visited by the stingless bees. So these are actually equivalent to 43 families or the 84 plant species. And 61 pollen types are identified in the lowland ecosystem, while 47 pollen types also are identified in another site in Naga City, also of the lowland ecosystem. While only 22 to 33 different pollen types are identified in the upland ecosystem. So you will notice that the very few pollens are being identified in the upland rather than in the lowland ecosystem. It has something to do also with the number of flowering plants that can be found also in each ecosystem. Next slide, please. So these are just some of the pollens that I have observed on out of my acetylysis. So those are the different kinds of pollens. So I have just do some microscopic examination for the identification of this pollen. Next slide. So those are also some of the pollens that are gathered by the stingless bees. Next slide, please. So we have here the relationship of the bloom pattern with the diversity of the forage pollen. So as you can see in the graph, there is it showed a linear relationship, that the diversity of pollen showed a linear relationship with the bloom pattern. So if there is an increasing number of blooming plants in the area, it has a corresponding number, an increase in the number of pollen types that is also being foraged by the stingless bees. Next slide. Okay. So same with the other site also. So this is also a linear relationship with the pollen types foraged by the stingless bee as to the blooming plants that is found in the different ecosystem. So interpolation with pollen spectrum or the diversity of the forage pollen and the flowering plants plotted against time showed that pollen diversity and abundance of blooming increased during the 12-month of the steady period. So as you can see before, there is a peak of blooming from January to March. But however, based on the analysis, there is no significant relationship between the pollen diversity and the bloom pattern. Next slide, please. Okay, so I do also the rarefaction analysis and the pollen richness of the two sites. So I actually do it in the lowland ecosystem only because in the upland ecosystem, I was not able to do that during the 12-month study period because of the dearth period. The colonies died during my study because of the frequent rainy season, and it's so cold also that the temperature is very cold in the upland ecosystem. So in site in Pili, the rarefaction or species accumulation curves for March, April, and May have a higher slope, as you can see in the presentation. So there is a higher slope in the month of May. That's actually the higher there is the month of May, which means that the bees also obtained a greater number of pollens during that month. Now, in another site in Naga City, there is a similarities in the refraction curve. As you can see in the lower part, so there are some similarities in certain months of the year. And of course, the highest there is also the month of May. So as you can see also in the graph, there is a tendency in Naga City that the graph is also flatter a little bit in certain months of the year. Meaning to say, the bees, the Tetragonella beroi, they have a similarity in the composition or the number of flowering plants during that month. And the bees also would always go back to these flowers during those period. Next slide, please. So this is also the monthly species richness in Naga City based on the Chow estimate. So as you can see, May has indicated to have the highest number of pollens that is being gathered or foraged by distinguished bees. So it has the higher species richness, and it is significantly different from the rest of the month. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is also the monthly species richness at Pili site. So as you can see, from February to March to May, they have actually a similarity or similarity in the species richness. So because it already coincided with the blooming period of the different plants on those sites, so that's why it has also the higher number of the diversity of the forage pollen. Okay, so next slide, please. So as to the results, it is suggested that although many plants could be blooming in the area, as I've identified 121 species of the flowering plants within the vicinity, it's not an assurance that distinguished bees may forage in all those plants. So that's why, based on the pollen analysis, I have only identified 84 pollen types. So meaning probably other plants are also visited not for pollen, but also for the nectar sources. So among the different plants that is being visited by the bees, there were plants that highly preferred or less preferred by distinguished bees as pollen sources. Actually, the Tetragonella beroi will not distinguish plant as to the morphology, as to the color. What is important to distinguish bees, as I've noticed, is what we call as the floral rewards. That is the abundance of the nectar and the pollen sources. And in fact, hiving or beekeeping using distinguished bees is advantageous than the other species of honeybees such as Apis cerana and Apis mellifera, because distinguished bees, because of the small size of the bees, they could explore those plants that have a minute flowers. So they can forage on that flower. As shown in the picture, it is a flower of a bee species, which we call the oxalis species. So these are tiny flowers. So they just grow under the coconut plantation, and the bee could forage on that flower. So they explore efficiently the different flowers or plants in the area. So the diversity of the forage pollen may be influenced by the preferences of the bees and not by the plants and bloom. Next slide. So pollen spectrum is affected by the kinds and number of flowering plants available within the foraging range of the bees. And as you can see in the result of the rarefaction analysis and regression analysis, flowering plants showed linear relationship with the blooming period, and the abundance of the flowering plants preferred by distinguished bees also influenced the diversity of the forage pollen. Next slide. So there is a marked differences in the species richness between the two sites, the lowland and the upland ecosystem. And the higher 95% confidence limits prove that distinguished bees frequently visit and collect higher amounts of pollens. Now, there is an overlapping of lower 95% confidence limits, which indicate that the collected pollens have common forage value to the distinguished bees. So from secondary, minor to important minor pollen sources. Next slide. So the analysis of the pollens that we have done in this research enhance our knowledge of the Tetragonella beroi botany. This is also used as guide in determining areas that is suitable for meliponiculture and the plants to be grown in the area. If the beekeepers who decided to establish a new colony in other areas. The palynological composition of the pollen foraged by Tetragonella beroi indicates the biodiversity of the beekeeping areas. Okay, next slide. So the succeeding slide are just a picture of the different flowering plants or the pollen sources of the stingless bees. Next slide. Okay, so these are just a few of the flowering plants. So I think Indonesia and also the Bicol region shared the same composition of the flowering plants. Then also this one. Next slide. Okay. Now, by the way, I've noticed that the stingless bees also attracted to the blue flowers. They frequently also visited that flower. This is a species of a weed species. We called it silisilihan because the fruit looks like a chili. So this is Cleome rithodisperma. So these are visited by the bee, and the other one on the left side is also a weed species called beggar's stick or Bidens belosa. Then we have also the coconut, and the lower part is the Samanea saman. We call this the rain tree or the acacia tree. Okay, so next slide. So these are also some of the important pollen sources of the stingless bees. Okay, terima kasih. Good morning.
So thank you very much, Dr. Balderas. That was very nice talk. So for students who just joining this lecture, just to let you know a bit what Dr. Balderas has mentioned on her general lecture. She has done an extensive research on the analysis of pollen forage by the stingless bee. And what she mentioned before, she has conducting the acetylysis to determine the quality of pollen and then identified the plant that visited by the stingless bee, foraging behavior, as well as classification of pollens into several groups. So there's a lot of work that she had carried out for her work. Now time is for question. If you have any question, please raise your hand and don't forget to mention your name. And Dr. Balderas will be very happy to answer or to give you any explanation. If you have a problem with English, just mention your question in Indonesia and I'll try my best to translate in English. Or if I can't, there's a lot of senior in here, Dr. Santi can help me to translate. So please, for the first session, 3 questions. One question from Pak Wahid, just waiting. From Pak Telly, another one for the first session. Okay, then we will start with the first 2 then. Pak Wahid, silakan. And then Pak Dr. Balderas, we just collect the question and I can answer set. Okay. Then Pak Telly.
All right. Thank you, Bu Made. That was such a wonderful presentation and a lot of work. I have several questions. The first one is you conduct research to observe the difference between lowland and upland cultivation. According to your research result, which one is better? I mean, which area which will give better quality of honey or
So-
higher production result?
Okay, thank you for that question, Dr. Wahid. Actually, based on this, the results of my study, the lowland ecosystem is better in terms of the hiving or beekeeping Tetragonella beroi, because majority of our agricultural activities are done also in the lowland ecosystem. Well, in the upland ecosystems, it is mountainous, so only very few of the cultivated species can be planted in those areas. And the trees, usually these are composed of grasses and trees in the upland ecosystem. So the trees are normally flowered only once a year, so they are seasonal. So meaning the pollen sources of the bee on that particular ecosystem is also very limited. So that is why if our local bee hunters would hunted or would gather feral colonies from the wild, meaning those colonies have already stayed for several years. So that's why we encourage our beekeepers to look for an area, although they could, if there are no choice for an area in the upland ecosystem, we encourage them to plant those different flowering plants that are actually identified to be as pollen or nectar sources of the bees, to enhance also the diversity of the flowering plants in the upland ecosystem.
Can I have one more? I noticed from your presentation, in Philippines, they use coconut shell for the hives of the bee. How to maintain the colony? And what is the advantage of using coconut shell as the house of the bees?
One advantage of using coconut shell is that they are abundant in the locality. So the farmer or the beekeeper would not spend any amount for the construction of hive using the wood, because we have also law in the Philippines to avoid cutting of trees in those forested areas. Then another one advantage of using coconut shell is that we can actually we can actually separate the brood, the honey pot, and the pollen pots. We can identify it by just pricking we call it the eye. We use the part of the coconut with the three eyes on it, with eye on the coconut shell. So we just prick it. We just prick it. Now, if a liquid, pricking it by using a toothpick, so if a liquid will comes out of that, so it means it has pollen, it has honey pots. But if this some sort of a powder, meaning that coconut shell is full of pollen. But if it's milky, it means that coconut shell are full with the brood. So if we wanted to harvest, say for example, honey only, so we'll just look for the coconut shell full of honey. That is why avoiding also the destruction of the brood as well as of the pollen pots.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think it's a good idea. It's probably a good lesson learned from the Philippines that like farmers here can apply. So next question from Pak Telly, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Bu Made. Thank you for the super presentation from Dean Marlene. I'm describing myself on the top of food pyramid. So I'm more consumer for honey, and yet had to learn about honey, how it's produced. Well, one of your slides you showed us that on this month, from January to April, let's say, you have more flowers and more foraging bees. And I imagine that more honey is produced. And what about the quality of the honey produced during different time period in a year, because sometimes I observe that I have this kind of honey. Let's say in rainy season, it's more fluid, less concentrated, and so on. What about the quality of the honey? And as a chemist, I learned that you can expect more secondary metabolites from plants if it's challenged by environments. Let's say if the plants are grown in dry area, and you can expect more secondary metabolites or active ingredients or active compounds from the plant. Did you observe that in your work? Thank you very much.
Okay. Actually, I have observed that, although it's not part of my research, it's being done also, will be done also by our food technology department. But there is actually a differences in the honey of the stingless bees that is also being honey that is being kept by the stingless bees. There are months that very sour. There is also a little bit bitter taste, probably because of the pollen sources. And in fact, I have noticed that some of the pollens that I've gathered are actually bitter in taste. And we do not know why the bees gathered those pollens. And it also affected the taste of the honey. And now, in my observation, I think that those bitter pollen that is being gathered or foraged by the stingless bees is also very important to them because they forage it in the onset of the rainy season. Probably that pollen would contain a higher alkaloids that will also contains a lot of antibacterial or antifungal properties. And I think if we have some collaboration, I think with the chemistry group, I'd love to work on that with the Department of Food Technology because that is also a research that I failed to conduct because of my administrative work. So actually there are a lot of research collaboration in stingless bees that I would like to connect also with the Universitas Mataram. And with the facilities that available in your university, I think we could do a lot of research. Another is one of our colleagues also do some research in Bali, Indonesia, the potential of militourism in Bali, Indonesia. That is also one of our faculty doing with that. And I think that kind of research could be also possible in Lombok. With the presence of the stingless bees, we can actually explore the potential of Lombok for militourism. Because in the Philippines, we are really passionate about it. And not only because, as I mentioned, it increased our agricultural production, but we encourage this agri-ecotourism. We have partners with the different cooperatives, and we encourage those government retirees to spend their retired money on putting up what we call as learning sites for agriculture. So we have the LSA. Though this LSA undergo an accreditation process with the Department of Agriculture, with the Department of Trade and Industry, the TESDA. So that LSA is not only for educating the farmers in the far-flung areas, but also to encourage them also to educate the youth, to become engaged also in agri-tourism. And as stingless bee is a flagship commodity, we encourage them to put also some colonies of stingless bees in their learning sites.
Thank you.
This stuff? Okay. More question from the student? Okay, one. And please mention your name.
Oke, sebelumnya mohon maaf ya, saya pertanyaan menggunakan bahasa Indonesia.
Baik.
Sebelumnya perkenalkan, nama saya Susi Lestari Widiantika dari Prodi Pendidikan Kimia. Jadi di sini yang ingin saya tanyakan mungkin agak sedikit dari luar konteks penelitiannya. Jadi di sini kan tadi membahas tentang madu yang lebah tanpa memiliki sengat. Nah, jadi yang ingin saya tanyakan di sini, bagaimana cara lebah tersebut mempertahankan diri dari lawan sehingga dia bisa bertahan sehingga bisa menghasilkan madu tetragonula tadi. Mungkin hanya itu, terima kasih.
Baik, so there's a question from the student from the chemistry department in the Faculty of Education, and her question was, because you're talking about the stingless bee, definitely. So she just wondering, because stingless, and how actually the stingless bee can survive from the predator. That's why they can produce honey. That's the question.
So the stingless bee produce propolis, a lot of propolis. This is a substance gathered by the bees from the resin-producing plants. So this one is used to protect the colonies, to seal the hive, and at the same time, this is also used by the stingless bees to prevent these different predators in the wild. So if the predators are attempt to enter the hive, so the stingless bees would put a lot of propolis in the entrance so that they can trap the predators. And in order to prevent also the different predators, we see to it that the colony of the bee should remain strong, because that is only one way also of protecting the colony of the stingless bees. But propolis is very important a prevention for the entry of these different predators such as other insects, small insects.
Bisa ditangkap? Jadi intinya yang dikatakan oleh Dr. Balderas, yang paling penting bagi mereka itu adalah adanya propolis. Propolis itu yang akan melindungi koloni yang sudah ada, sehingga dia aman dari serangan predator-predator yang mungkin datang, sehingga dia bisa menghasilkan madu. Ya,
Oke, thank you.
More question? Alright, then I have a question for you, Dr. Balderas. I think you mentioned about, I forgot what's the connection, but I think you mentioned about it is, sorry, I lost my question. Sorry, just a moment. So it is important not to, as much as possible, try to avoid splitting off the colony. Yeah, so is that any reason why?
I have mentioned that we avoid splitting of the colonies during the rainy season.
Okay.
Because it will be very hard for the bees to gather food, especially propolis, to seal the hive or to repair the colonies. So that's why it's only the time of the year that we should, as much as possible, avoid a splitting of the colonies. So to safeguard the colony, to encourage also multiplication of the colony, as much as possible, we do it on the onset of the dry season. In that case, there are a lot of flowering plants. There are abundant flowering plants in the area. There are also, the bees could also explore a lot of places, a lot of areas. Especially, they could gather propolis. That is also essential in repairing the hive.
Right, and I know that you have visited farmers in North Lombok during your stay in here. I mean, do you have any probably suggestion based on your experience? Because you mentioned that also weather climate condition also affect the quality of the pollen and then type of plants, something like that. So maybe you can, what you observe during your visit in North Lombok, maybe you can suggest something for the farmers in North Lombok. So probably Pak Wahid can later on spread on your message to the farmer there, based on your experience?
So actually, what we need first is to identify the potential flowering plants in the area. What I've noticed in Lombok is the presence of cacao, Tibroma cacao, as well as of the cashew nut. So I think that would be one of the dominant source of nectar or pollen for the trigona in Lombok. But I am not so familiar with the other plants. But some of the plants are also similar with the plants that are also found in our region. So say for example, Moringa oleifera, the Leucocipala, Leucaena leucocipala are also there. Um, I forgot the other flowering plants. But to make the beekeeping more, to enhance the beekeeping of trigona in Lombok, I think we need also to identify those different flowering plants, teach also the farmers how to plant this in their area. Because I've noticed that because of the shaded, because the area is shaded by the presence of those trees, so there are no weeds under those colonies. Unlike in the Philippines, these are partially shaded. There are a lot of grasses, flowering plants, or weed species that also grow in the area. And that probably support the food sources of the bees.
Thank you. More question? One, yes, please, Ibu Dr. Dewi.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, Bu Made. It was really interesting to hear your presentation. I'm Devi from the Faculty of Medicine, Mataram University. What I'm trying to ask here is something that perhaps I could share with my friends back in the faculty, because you mentioned about propolis in your presentation, and several of our colleagues are also focusing on the compound of propolis as a source of future drug compounds, perhaps. So what I'm curious to know is, in your area, particularly in the university, how far has propolis has been explored in terms of the use in medicine? And perhaps from that, I could pass on to my colleagues and see what future collaboration that perhaps could be extend. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that question. Actually, the composition of propolis is not yet been studied in our university, but we have noticed several uses of propolis. I myself use it as a form of disinfectant. During the time of COVID-19, we have the ethanolic extract of propolis. We do that, to extract it and give it to the community as part of disinfectant. Some of it also is used as a tooth spray, because we have also found out, I even experienced it myself, that if you dip cotton on the ethanolic extract of propolis and put it in your aching tooth, in less than 2 minutes, it's gone. So it is a very good analgesic also. And some of our colleagues also studied propolis as antibacterial or antifungal in the veterinary medicine. So we have done that particular research. And some also in other universities, they try to explore the potential of propolis as a sort of medicine. But for experience, on our experience, so I noticed of the analgesic effect of the propolis. So even if someone is also has an allergy, skin allergy, we used to apply propolis. So that is based on my experience. Not only that, even the honey itself of the stingless bees is also medicinal. I think you could also explore that. It is a very good cure for burns. I have a grandson who is a less than 1 year old when he suffered a second-degree burn, and the doctor would apply ointment on the burn, but in a week it has no, it never healed. But when I tried to apply the honey of the stingless bees, in a week it dries out. So meaning to say, it has some potential on it. Probably the medicine, the Faculty of Medicine could explore it as a form of, how do you call it, bandage, band-aid that we put on the wound. I even tried it myself when I got wounded. So I put a little of the honey and it will easily dry out. It could heal soon. So probably you could explore that. We do not have a course in medicine, but I think the Universitas of Mataram could explore the potential also of the honey and propolis in human medicine.
Thank you very much for the explanation.
Yep, please, Ibu Dr. Rin.
Thank you very much, Dr. Marilyn. Nice to see your presentation. I come from food technology and agro-industry, and I have some experience using the Trigona honey from Apis dorsata from the north of Lombok. We use it as a preservative. You mentioned that the honey has antibacterial compound and also antioxidant. And from the research, we found that the honey from the Trigona can extend the shelf life of the bread for a few days longer. And we use it also to extend the life of lactic acid bacteria in yogurt. We have some experience producing nabati yogurt. That is not from the apa kita bilang? From the plant. So yogurt from the plant. So we determine that the honey from the Trigona can produce higher amount of lactic acid bacteria, and the quality of the yogurt is become much better. Thank you.
So thank you for sharing that information. I think we should also explore that and relay that information to our College of Engineering and Food Science. We're in the Food Technology faculty. We'll also work on that. But actually, we have also noticed that the honey of Tetragonella beroid does not expire at all. No, that the more that it is being stored, the more that I think the potential, how do you call it? Because of the antibacterial, antifungal of the honey, so it will not how do you call it? It will not spoil, actually. So thank you very much, ma'am, for that information.
Thank you, Ibu Dr. Rin. Any more question? Okay, if you don't have any question, then please have a seat, Dr. Balderas. So before we finish this session, just would like to, just a few notes that I can make from Dr. Balderas' lecture today. So there is a linear correlation between blooming patterns and pollen diversity, and therefore it is very important to identify different flowering plant. So there's one note, and the second one is a climate condition definitely affect the pollen's characteristic and also the quality. And the remarks probably from Dr. Balderas' lecture, research opportunity definitely open for staff in both sides. I mean from University of Mataram and the Cbsua Philippines. That's probably the remarks from her talk today. So everyone, please give a big applause to Dr. Balderas. So thank you very much, Dr. Balderas, and please apologize for any inconveniences occurred during this session. And I would like to end up this session. Selamat, selamat pagi dan terima kasih.
Morning. All right, thank you, Dr. Hewan Madesriasi, PhD, for serving as moderator for the first keynote speaker. And we would like to express our deepest appreciation to the first keynote speaker, Dr. Malirin Balderas, for sharing her insight through inspiring and enlightening presentation. We are grateful for your presence with us today. Once again, thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's moving on to the second keynote speaker that will be delivered by Dr. Darrell M. Ocampo as the lecturer at College of Development Education, Cbsua. And the second keynote speaker will be moderated by Bonista Zulanda Melanie, MA, PhD. To Dr. Darrell and Mrs. Bonista, please kindly take a seat on the stage. So for this session, I will let Mrs. Bonista to lead the discussion.
Baik, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. The Honorable Rector of the University of Mataram, the Vice Rectors of the University of Mataram, Deans of the Faculty, Heads of Departments, distinguished guests from the, Central Bicol State University of Agriculture, the Philippines. Dear colleagues, students, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming this morning. Good morning, selamat pagi, and magandang umaga. I try to speak a little bit of Philippines today. Okay, but thank you. So a very warm greeting from the University of Mataram. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Today we can all gather together to follow and join the second lecture by Dr. Darrell Ocampo, right? Yeah, I've been in your lecture yesterday in the Faculty of Teachers Training, so this is going to be your second one. All right, so as being introduced before, my name is Bonista Melanie, and I'm a senior lecturer in the Department of English Educations in the Faculty of Teachers Training and Educations. And this morning I will serve as your moderating, okay, throughout your presentations. So before we begin, I would like to introduce you to our distinguished speaker for this morning, Dr. Darrell Ocampo. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. All right. So a little bit of information about Dr. Ocampo. So he is a professor of English language at the Central Bicol State University of Agriculture. Oh, Bicol. I'm sorry. Okay, thank you. Thank you for the corrections. Central Bicol State University of Agriculture, or CBSUA. And Dr. Ocampo, is under the College of Development Education. He earned his bachelor's degree in English and his Master of Arts in Education, majoring in English language teaching. He also pursued a doctoral degree in language and literacy development, specializing in metapragmatics. And his research interests are linguistics, pragmatics, stylistics, and discourse analysis. And currently, he is an associate member of the National Research Council of the Philippines and a member of the National Committee on Language and Translation under the Philippines National Commissions of Culture and the Arts, right? And as a researcher, he has published several works in various international peer-reviewed journals and presented his papers at different conferences, including the one that he's going to present today, right? So today, Dr. Ocampo will have the opportunity at the University of Mataram to deliver his lecture on reshaping English language teaching in higher educations of the ASEAN region for a sustainable future. All right, so that's a little bit information about Dr. Ocampo and his topic that he's going to deliver today. As well, similar with the previous presentations, there will be a 1 hour time for Dr. Ocampo to deliver his speech. And at the end of his presentations, the audience will be given the opportunity to ask questions to Dr. Ocampo on the topic that he's delivering. All right, so without further ado, I'd like to welcome Dr. Ocampo to start his presentation. So the time is yours. Thank you.
Terima kasih. Good morning, marahay na aldaw, magandang umaga, salamat pagi. I hope I pronounce it right. Okay, so I'm Dr. Darrell Ocampo and I'm going to deliver my lecture, second lecture actually, about reshaping English language teaching in higher education of the ASEAN region for a sustainable future. A while back, Dr. Marilyn discussed about topic which is quite technical because she delivered about stingless bees. I hope the people here in the audience still has the energy. I hope you still have the energy to listen to my discussion, considering that a while back it's quite technical, okay? Whereas in my discussion, the second lecture, it is in general in nature because I'm going to talk about education, specifically venturing in English language teaching. So I hope that most of the students here or the faculty members have background, of course, in English language education. Next slide. Okay, so actually, before I start making my presentation, while I was preparing to craft my presentation, I listened to a song, okay, by Diana Ross. I know that most of you here know Justin Bieber, Taylor Swift, Ed Sheeran, who else? Agnes in Indonesia, Agnes, what's the last name? Agnes Monica, right? Yeah, those are the popular names, contemporary singers, and I know that you know them well. But you know what? In my case, I have a soul, an old soul in me. So when I was preparing, I listened to a song. It was actually a song sung by Diana Ross. She is a very popular back in the late 80s. And the title of the song is "If We Hold On Together." Okay? Do not ask me to sing this song. I am not a singer. I am a lecturer. So if you will be asking me to give a sample, later on we will do that because I actually invited a student from Cbsua who will share and deliver the song later. But the lyrics of the song goes this way. Don't lose your way with each passing day. You've come so far, don't throw it away. Live believing, dreams are for weaving, wonders are waiting to start. We need to live our story, faith, hope, and glory. And we need to hold to the truth in our hearts. Because if we hold on together, I know our dreams will never die, and these dreams see us through to forever, where clouds roll by for you and I. Side by side, I put there the Bahasa Indonesia translation, and I hope you can digest and at the same time internalize the meaning of the song. Again, I will not give a sample. I will not be singing this one. I invited the student who will sing that. Next slide. But the content of this song is very much important. The content of the song talks about and banks in to the idea of partnership, the importance of collaboration. And I think that's the very soul, that's the very purpose why we are here. To collaborate, to forge stronger ties between Unram and Cbsua. That amidst the fact that we have geographical divide coming from different countries, having different cultures, having different faith, having different religion, if we aim to have stronger relationship, anything is possible, right? And because of this, we have the so-called ASEAN integration, wherein we have the following member states. You have there Myanmar, Thailand, Laos, Philippines, Brunei Darussalam, Vietnam, Malaysia, Cambodia, Singapore, Indonesia, and of course, Philippines. With the creation of ASEAN integration, next please, the tasks and demands were given to all the ASEAN higher education. And once I say tasks and demands, we're talking about the different standards being required by the different ASEAN universities, ASEAN higher education to all of us, right? Including Unram and of course, the Philippines. With the demands, with the tasks, with the different standards being required from us, both from the faculty and all the employees. Next, please. We need to bank in to the three important human capitals. What are these three important human capitals? The SKA. S stands for skills. K stands for knowledge. And most importantly, A stands for the attitude. As faculty, as member of the ASEAN states, as member of the ASEAN, and at the same time, ASEAN higher education, the faculty members need to bank in to these three important skills: knowledge, skills, and attitude. We need to bank in, okay, and at the same time cultivate these human capitals in order, next slide, to make our students globally competitive at par with the global standards. Next. And we are actually running in the same circle. Hence, the so-called ASEAN integration. Amidst the barriers, language barriers, geographical divide, all of us are gearing towards one goal. And that is keeping at par with the global standards. Next slide. And of course, English language plays a very important role to achieve the so-called one ASEAN. Why is that, sir? It's because we need to have a common ground, a common framework, in order for us to understand each other. And that is the important role of English language. We can be able to understand each other having different languages, right? Hence, English language is what will bind all of us to achieve the so-called one ASEAN. Next, please. Which has, or to achieve one vision, one identity, one community. Next slide. Next, please. And I believe Unram, the same thing with Cbsua, want our students to achieve the so-called lifelong learning. But the question there is, how do we foster and how do we achieve lifelong learning to our learners, to our students, if in the first place we have issues regarding competition? Which university among the ASEAN region is the best, right? It was mentioned by Professor Bambang that in Simago University rankings, Unram is placed 19th in Indonesia. In Cbsua, we have different ranking. In QS ranking, we achieved 4 stars. And now we are actually vying for the Times Higher Education ranking. We are actually applying for that. And I believe this is actually the competition that I am saying. Okay? So the question there is, how can we, next slide, or how can we promote synergy in ASEAN higher education amid the competitions? Who's the best among the different universities in ASEAN members? That's the question, right? Personally, on a personal note, if you will ask me, I love healthy competition. Why? Because the idea of healthy competition gives us the opportunity to show what is best to each in the university that we have or we are affiliated with. Next, please. And it means we need to cultivate faculty exchange, faculty and student exchange. Again, the idea of partnership, the idea of collaboration. Likewise, the idea of conducting collaborative researches. And at the same time, due to the pandemic, we need to foster also the health and well-being of our students. All these things, once we ensure that we are cultivating the idea of instruction, the idea of research, the idea of civic works, we can ensure lifelong learning to our students. Next slide, please. Well, we continue to uphold the values of academic freedom and institutional autonomy. We also need to encourage collective ownership of higher education institutions to ensure that their delivery is more responsive to the demand-side needs, bringing about social accountability for higher education institutions. What does it mean? It only means that while we are trying to become globally competitive, keeping at par with the global standards, we should never forget our very own identity. What is Unram should remain to its identity. What is Cbsua should remain to its identity while keeping abreast, while keeping attuned, okay, to the global standards. Next slide. Now the question is, how can we promote or reshape English language teaching to be responsive to the challenges of the current times? There are actually 4 things that we can do. 1, the verb or the word, educate. Next. I hope I got the translation right. Mendedic, wherein we need to educate holistic professionals who are able to address complex issues cooperatively. Again, stressing the idea of cooperation. The second word, adapt or mengambil. I hope I pronounce it right. Mengambil, okay? Which means we need to adapt inter and transdisciplinary approaches to language research and innovation. The third one, we need to act. Bertindak. Act with a sense of social responsibility at the local, national, regional, and global levels. The fourth one, include or termasuk, including ideas for social transformation from diverse sources. Now let's try to discuss, or let me try to discuss,
each of the word. Next slide, please. We have the first term, Mindedic, educate. Education must be seen at two levels, both on the macro and micro levels. Now, when we talk about macro levels, these are the things that we can do as faculty and at the same time as students, especially those who have administrative functions. One, mobility of students and teachers, which we are observing right now. We have the so-called ICTP, International Credit Transfer Program. Second, the recognition of qualifications, the one that I mentioned, the standards, which I think must not be a non-negotiable thing. Next, development of regional subject-specific quality standards. The fourth one, a language curriculum audit. From time to time, we need to make an audit with the curriculum that we are offering, okay? And to make sure or ensure that our curriculum is responsive to the needs of time, to the needs of our students. The next is the active participation of the students, teachers, and stakeholders. It is not just the burden of the faculty. It is not just the burden of those who have administrative functions. Likewise, it must be a collaborative effort among students, the teachers, and the stakeholders. So you can see there the students from Unram. We also have the different faculty, our rector or president, President Naperi, the vice president for internationalization, Professor Kamba. So we have there Dr. Junet. We have there Dean Malin, our dean, Dean Riapor, the dean of the College of Education. We conducted their series of seminars, and we also have a picture below. Those were the faculty who went here last December, if I'm not mistaken. Next slide. Then we have the so-called ICTP, International Credit Transfer Program, where students from Unram can go to the Philippines in our university at Cbsua to experience new learning spaces, to experience the Cbsua way. In the same manner, students from Cbsua are provided, okay? The opportunities to go here also. I have with me my 10 students. 8 are from the Faculty of Education, 2 are from the College of Agriculture and Natural Resources. They will be exposed to Unram way when it comes to learning. Next slide. We also have there Dr. Janet. He delivered a series of lectures, which I am also doing here together with Ma'am Malin and Ma'am Emma. Next slide. There are also programs and agencies operating in the ASEAN's region, which I believe most of the faculty are aware of. These are, next, the ASEAN University Network, AUN. We also have the Sea Teacher Program. We also have the CMEO Regional Center specializing in higher education and development. So these are the different programs operating in the ASEAN region, which ensure quality learning, okay, in the different ASEAN universities. Next, please. Now, how about on the micro level? Micro level, that means what are the things we do inside the language classroom, English language classroom. And this has something to do with us English teachers. What are the different activities we provide to our learners? One, we need to realign our instruction. We need to realign the way we approach, the way we prepare our instruction. Especially contextualize it, okay, to what is needed by our students. So how can we contextualize our instruction? First and foremost, we need to understand our students. As I said a while ago, we need to be globally competitive, be at par with the global standards while maintaining our identity. That term is encapsulated by the word glocalization. The term is glocalization or glocalized approach. Being globally at par with the being at par with the global standards while maintaining our identity. We also have the term glocalization in English language, which I mentioned a while ago. Creativity in teaching strategies and methodologies. Innovative instructional materials. Democratization of teaching and learning processes. Next slide, please. So those are the things which I conducted in English language classroom. Those are my students, Indonesian students, when they had their gamification. I asked them to make their own games which they can use in teaching English. And I was really amazed by their game. Okay, next. Okay, so we also have here the four-dimensional framework. And this, I think, is very much important to all of us teachers who are present now in this hall. What's the content of the four-dimensional framework? It has something to do with the instruction. It has something to do on how we approach, on how we deliver our instructions. It has four important elements. The SKA, which I mentioned a while back, we need to bank in with the skills of our learners. We need to cultivate, nurture their knowledge, and we need also to ensure that we are forming good characters among them. But with the pandemic, it taught us one important lesson, that we must go beyond thinking. Hence, the so-called meta-learning. Aside from banking, aside from teaching our students or nurturing the skills, knowledge, and attitude of our learners, the most important quality and the most important thing that we need to develop to our learners is their ability to think beyond thinking. That means we allow our students to become thinkers, not just within the four corners of the room. They can apply it even beyond the four corners of the classroom. And that is the importance of this four-dimensional framework. As teachers, we need to expose our learners, cultivate our learners when it comes to their skills, to their knowledge, to their character. Much more to bank in to their ability to think beyond thinking, the so-called meta-learning. Next slide. And these are actually some of the effective approaches in teaching English that suits to the diversity of learners' interests and needs. We can actually approach or we can actually integrate dialogic approaches inside our classrooms, inquiry-based activities, cooperative or collaborative tasks, and engaging learning. I have here sample activities. Next slide. Okay, so you have the Rizky, the Indonesian students. I mentioned a while ago, I asked them to create gamification. The idea of gamification is creating game, okay, which you can use to engage the learners. And you know what, Dr. Santi, you did not fail in sending them because they are really, really good. Aside from that, the characters are there, and I'm really happy to meet them and be my students because they are really, really good. And the moment I asked them to create an activity, particularly gamification, they delivered. The title of their game is Jadi, which means finish, right? So I was really, really amazed by it because it really helps to teach their classmates when it comes to learning English, basic of English. And I think you are having or you are developing good or excellent teachers someday in the name of these different students you sent at Cbsua. Congratulations on that particular aspect. I also conducted their impromptu speeches and different activities where I involve students. We also have debates and all other staff, which is to ensure my students are involved to the different activities that I provide. Next slide. So I actually have a sample gamification which was developed by my students. Perhaps I can show you an example of it. Can you play the video please?
Cbsua is a board game inspired by Scrabble, only with more exciting twists and challenges. This game can be played by 2 to 4 players. To start off, all players should have a tile rack. Choose a category and place all the tiles in the bag. Shake it off to shuffle the tiles. The order of the players shall be determined through drawing a letter from the bag. The player who draws a letter closer to A shall go first. But if a player draws a blank tile, he or she shall start the game. The players shall return the tiles to the bag and draw 7 random tiles this time and set them on their tile racks so the other players can see them. The first player will place a word on the star pin in the center of the board, which is equivalent to green B. Players can make words vertically or horizontally, but not diagonally. The word must be read from left to right or top to bottom. When a player places a word on the board, the scorer must add up all of the point values of the tile used. If a letter is placed in a premium square, count the value and add it to the score. If a player places a word with all 7 of the tiles, automatically add 50 points to the score of that turn. After scoring, the player draws more tiles from the bag to maintain the 7 tiles on the rack. After the first player's turn, the next player goes and the game continues in a clockwise direction around the video board. Each new word must connect to the existing word in one of the following ways. First, adding 1 or more letters to a word already on the board. Second, placing a word at right angles to a word already on the board. The new word must use one of the letters already on the board or must add a letter to one of the words on the board. Third, placing a complete word parallel to a word already placed so that adjacent letters also form complete words. If the players are unhappy with their tiles on the rock, they can skip their turn and instead trade in any number of tiles for new tiles from the bag, except from the tile bump. Those must remain in the rack until the challenge has been done. All words must also be in the dictionary, so if the other player thinks it's not a real word, he or she can challenge the current player and look up the word from the dictionary or word checker application. If it's not in there, it should be removed from the board and the player who made it loses the turn. The game ends when all tiles are gone from the bag and the single player has placed all of the tiles on the board, or all players exchange some number of tiles twice in a row for a total of 4 to 8 exchanges. When the game ends, each player's score is reduced by the sum of the unplayed letters. For each bump tile, twice of the letter's point shall be subtracted. In addition, if a player has used all of his or her tiles, the sum of the other player's unplayed letters is added to that player's score. In case of a tie, the player with the highest score before adding or deducting the unplayed letters wins. The player with the highest final score wins the game and will be called the victor.
So I think we can cut it there. So that is actually a sample gamification which I asked from my students. They are the ones who created it. And it's not just a simple game. It has a purpose. And the purpose is to learn the basic vocabulary, words, something that has to do with semantics. So you see, out from simple games, we can actually use that and integrate it in our lessons so that our students can learn while learning. That's the ultimate purpose of gamification. And I asked my students to do one. The same thing with Indonesian students when they went there. They created a very nice output also. This one was the output made by my third year students in English language preparation materials. So I think we can cut it. Okay, that's it. So the second word, as what I mentioned, we're just on the first word. There are 4 words, and I hope you can still bear with me. The second word, adopt. We need to establish regional research facilities and infrastructure to support joint research projects. In our yesterday's event, we talked about joint research seminars, different collaborations, aspects on collaborations, and I think we can start with that. We need to boost research culture and capacity. We need to deviate, this is very much important. We need to deviate from teaching-oriented towards research-oriented higher education institutions. In other words, in our language classrooms, or regardless of the field of concentration, instead of just banking into the idea of instruction, we also need to integrate research works and allow our students to be involved in research endeavors. That is very much important. And of course, make collaboration, which we are doing right now, among ASEAN higher education institutions. Again, we need to be at par with the global standards while maintaining our identity. And we need to adapt in order to adapt. Next slide. So these are the sample activities that we at Cbsua did for the past 3 to 5 years. We conducted at the College of Developmental Education just recently the second international, first national, and 7th regional forum on education and research. It just happened just recently on April 17 to 19 this year. Then I also have there, I actually made a research about gamification, okay? The title of the study is Flipping the Language Classrooms, Effects on Gamifying Instruction in the English Language Proficiency of Filipino ESL Students, which was published in ERIC, okay? Then we also have there the students at Cbsua who presented their research work. Those are actually science students, and their study was about petroleum made of plastic materials. The products underwent, what's the title? These are science majors. So they made petroleum out from plastic materials. They actually followed a particular a procedure, okay? So next slide. The next word is act. Under this, we need to work with local communities and industries. Work with local communities and industries should be the primary mode of outreach work. It was mentioned to us by the director in postgraduate that there are 3 important things that Unram are doing. One is teaching or instruction. Second is research. And the third one is civic work or public services. The same thing at Cbsua. We are actually mandated to do 4 things: research, instruction, production, and at the same time, extension works. And I think It's almost similar with Unram. So the following activities foster outcomes of partnership and cooperation between higher educations and local partners. One, awareness raising, which can be done through seminars and fora, capacity building, advocacy, awareness, technology transfer, incubating local industries and entrepreneurs. So we have here the following activities which we conducted in the past 3 to 5 years. Next slide. ALS, Alternative Learning System. Alternative Learning System is actually an agency in the Philippines which supports those who are deprived of education, out of school youth. And we conducted extension works to help these people, the out of school youth, especially during the pandemic. Okay, next slide. So what were the things that we provided? We provided them ideas, knowledge when it comes to how to use the softwares, okay, so that education will remain relevant and continues amidst the pandemic. So the project is called Du'ngaw. Du'ngaw is a local term which means peak, okay, to peak. Why? These people, the out-of-school youth, of enrollees of alternative learning system, these are the people who are marginalized, part of the marginalized sectors, and usually they are the ones being neglected. So the idea of to peak, Du'ngaw, is to see their situation, understand their situation, and offer the things that we can provide in order to help them. Next. So that's the title, Du'ngaw for all teachers and learners. Du'ngaw is an acronym which means digital understanding of new normal modalities using Google applications and upgrading of related skills. So that's the project we created for in extension, and that is actually a product of research. Okay, so we studied the literacy skills of the ALS learners, and we actually created extension activity for them. Next slide. The last term, include. We need to implement and sustain change, various assessment, monitoring and evaluation processes should be implemented. Continuous improvement, fine-tuning, and adaptation to the challenges within and outside the ASEAN region should always be part of the higher education's strategy. For instance, in the Philippines, with the process of implementing reforms, several activities and programs have been happening one after another in tight phases, such as changes in the curriculum, development of textbooks and other teaching materials, assessment strategies, career pathways, and the like. Align the programs and initiatives to achieve a common goal, which is the competitive advantage of the students, of our clienteles, within the context of increasing ASEAN regional integration. Next slide. Now, with these 4 words, in reshaping English language teaching in higher education of the ASEAN region for a sustainable future, they need to work hard, hand in hand. So you have there the word educate. Next, please. Adopt. We also have there the word act. And we also have the word include. All these words, all the things that we do, both in Unram and Cbsua, should always address. Next. It must be aligned with the sustainable development goals. In other words, if we're going to observe this framework, educating our students, adapting different strategies in order to address the different issues we are facing, making some actions, relevant actions, and including the different things involved in the community, we also need to realign all these things to the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. Because once we do that, we can ensure a sustainable future for our learners. Next slide. Partnerships must be multidimensional across domains and content. A holistic approach is necessary to ensure that no areas, students, stakeholders, and schools are left behind. In other words, all of us will be happy. Next. Partnership and cooperation in higher education can prepare learners to acquire relevant skill sets and achieve a collaborative mindset as they move towards the cultivation of an ASEAN identity and support the consolidation of the ASEAN community. Again, let me stress the idea. Being at par with the global standards while maintaining our identity. The identity of your university, Unram, and the identity of Cbsua. Next slide. There is a pressing need for higher education systems to be more receptive and responsive to all potential forms of partnership and cooperation. And we are very happy at Cbsua because Unram became open and accommodating to us. If we are to establish a culture of partnership and cooperation as an integrated and overarching strategy for shaping and transforming the future of higher education in Southeast Asia. As a conclusion, the demands and challenges of increasing ASEAN regional integration prompted varied responses from the ministers of education of the ASEAN member states. Countries like Brunei Darussalam, Cambodia, Laos, and Indonesia have aligned their strategic educational plans with their national vision or development plan. Likewise, next slide, Malaysia, the Philippines, and Thailand crafted higher education strategic plan to develop competent human resources in the context of increasing regional integration. Thailand has developed an ASEAN educational strategic plan which envisions that Thai people are ready for the ASEAN community. Curricular reforms were undertaken by the Philippines, Brunei, Cambodia, and Malaysia, while curricular review of increasing ASEAN regional integration was done by Thailand. Next slide. Meanwhile, the national teacher standards and assessments were enhanced in Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, and Thailand. Cambodia, Laos, and Indonesia strengthened their programs to increase access to education. All the ASEAN member states have prepared for human capacity building to achieve their vision and be ready for increasing ASEAN regional integration. With all these things that I mentioned, let me go back to the first slide. This one. With all the things I mentioned, with all the things I discussed, I would like to invite my student here to deliver to us a song. Again, the song was popularized by Diana Ross. And please let us internalize the message of the song. May I invite Ms. Kelsey Osea, our student from Cbsua, who will deliver to you the song of Diana Ross entitled If We Hold On Together, which is the main tenet, the gist of what I discussed to you this morning.
Please allow me to sing this song a cappella. Don't lose your way with each passing day. You've come so far. Each passing day, you've come so far.
again, if we hold on together, I know that the dreams of Unram and Cbsua to become stronger universities will never die. Terima kasih, good morning, salamat pagi.
Okay, thank you so much for a very inspiring presentations delivered by Dr. Ocampo on reshaping, I think it's English language teaching, right? Yeah. Let me just find out the article, the topic. Yeah, reshaping English language teaching in higher educations of the ASEAN region for a sustainable future. So, thank you so much. Now we come to the next sessions to ask for several questions from the audience. So we have several students here still following the presentations. Thank you so much. Maybe from the audience, from the instructors, or could you please raise your hands if you want to ask a question? Yes, we have one student right here. Rido, minta tolong mic-nya. Could you please mention your name and your major, okay?
Good morning, everyone. Honorable the Dr. Derla Campbell, hopefully my pronunciation and my speak it's good. I am final Junaharian from Sociology Education Study Program in FKP major in training teachers major. The first one, I want to apologize if my English is not too good because I'm not English student. And the first one, that before I come to my main question, I just only interesting with your pronunciation in how to speak English is like some African accent. It maybe is so far from the Philippines or African, but I just in entire speech if you delivered just now is about like some Africans in the accent. For come to my question about what you state and deliver about the higher education in the ASEAN. I've been told by someone, my lecture in the other place that said about the mindset of the importance of the mindset to increase our skill and our action in our life. It's research by Harvard University that the mindset in ourselves is very important to develop our skill and our action in our activity in our life. So, what is in your opinion about the mindset? It is important to encourage the higher education in the ASEAN. What is the main key to develop the higher education to compete the other regional by Southeast Asian? Because we know if we compare Southeast Asian regional with the other regional, so we still lose and can't to win because our competition and our skill in this society is not too good, not too good more. Thank you.
Did you get the questions?
That's a very interesting question, and that's I might agree to what you said a while ago. Talking about mindset is very much important if we talk about being at par with the global standards and keeping abreast with the fine-tuning when it comes to the things happening in our society. You know what? If we want to be at par with the global standards, it must start first within ourselves. you mentioned about mindset. We need to shift our mindset. And we need to be welcoming to changes. We need to be welcoming to the idea of partnership. We need not to be boxed, okay? We need to go outside our comfort zone, meet people. Now, let me talk about the micro level. Micro level, talking about micro level, it happens inside the classroom. And I think this is the task of us teachers to integrate the idea of mindset, the importance of collaboration, the importance of partnership. How do we do that? Integrate it in our lessons, in our activities. In simple steps, I think we can teach our students to shift their mindset. Being welcoming to other cultures, being welcoming to other ideas, being welcoming to the idea of partnership and collaboration. I think that's the most important thing that we can do. You know what? Small steps really matter. It creates a ripple of effects. And we always do that in the micro level, inside the classroom. And the one who will carry that task is, of course, none other than we teachers. And thank you so much for raising that particular question. You know what? The idea of assigned integration might sound demanding, might sound ambitious, might sound too big for us, right? But you know what? As what I mentioned, and let me stress it out, small steps really matter. And it should always start within the classroom to us teachers. Thank you.
So, do you get the answer? Do you have further questions, or would the answer be enough? Cukup jawabannya? Ada pertanyaan lagi?
All right, I can't get the point of the answer, but Dr. Campo said that from the micro level, from the classroom, but I not feel yet about the how can the teacher and lecturer shape our mindset in our classroom in the entire activities majorly. I cannot to feel this. Maybe it is be our job here to reshape the mindset in the classroom in the micro level. Thank you.
It's sad to know that you are not yet feeling it. But you know what? I mentioned this to our lecture yesterday, that we have two kinds of responsibility. And again, let me just stress this out. The two kinds of responsibility are, one, responsibility of the society. Second, the responsibility, your own responsibility to yourself. Why is it important that we should be aware of these kinds of responsibility? It's because if the first responsibility, the responsibility of society, including your teachers, failed, always remember that you still have the last responsibility, and that is your responsibility to yourself. If you are telling me right this moment that you are not yet feeling the change of mindset because of the teachers perhaps are not integrating it in their lessons, in the activities that they are providing, perhaps they failed their first responsibility to you, right? But remember, you still have the second responsibility, and that is your own responsibility to yourself. Perhaps changing of mindset must start from you, not from the external factors, not from the teachers. After all, that is a two-way process, right? And I hope everyone will always remember these two types, these two kinds of responsibility. That if the first responsibility of the society, even the teachers, fail, we always have our own responsibility to ourselves.
Thank you, Dr. Ocampo. So, would that be enough? Okay, great. So probably we need to have one more question because we have like limited of times. Okay. Yeah, we have Dr. Amin. So he's one of the lecturer here in the English department. So I think you saw him yesterday.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ocampo. My name is Amin. I'm one of the teachers in the Faculty of Teachers Training and Education, majoring in English. It was a very interesting presentation about how we can reshape ELT in higher education of the ASEAN regions for sustainable futures through the implementation of the 4 keywords. As you have mentioned, educate, adapt, act, and include. But frankly speaking, I didn't really get you to tell us explicitly about whether or not we should then set standards among the English teaching practitioners in ASEAN countries, which will, in my opinion, first enable we English teaching professionals to move around within ASEAN countries? Or do you think that we can expect then that the ASEAN countries can work together to set standards to offer something to the world of ELT? That, come on, have a look, we've got this standard, we've got these qualifications. So can you tell us a bit more that, please? Thank you.
That's very true. While I stress out things about ASEAN region, the things that we can do, and trying to divert the attention in ELT, particularly how can we apply it in language classrooms. The thing is, it's up to us teachers, okay? It's up to us teachers on how to adopt the things that we can observe. And the idea is to contextualize it. The idea of localization. The activities that we do, the different approaches, even the strategies, we need to become aware of it and carry that in each of the language classroom regardless of the field of concentration. Now, if we are going to stress out specifically for ELT, I think it's very much important that we, faculty members of the language, English language, should talk also, should come up with collaboration. My point is trying to focus more on the field of concentration, English. And perhaps there are actually many activities in ASEAN, banking in the idea of improving ELT among its member states. And as what I mentioned a while ago, it's very important that we need to become aware of the role of English as a common ground, as a binding force in order for the member states to understand each other, to carry their goals.
Thank you. So, Pak Dr. Amin.
Do you think it will be possible that the ASEAN countries will offer something new in way of teaching English or ELT? Because so far I think we've been referring always to the Western methods and approaches. Do you think that we can cooperate within ASEAN countries? Then we, as the ELT professionals, can offer something new to challenge, let's say, what has been believed by most of us in the ELT world. Thank you.
Very interesting questions.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, there will be an ASEAN TFL which will be conducted this coming August. That is actually the gathering of all ELT practitioners. I, for one, will be presenting my study about metapragmatics. And my point is, because of the pandemic, we experienced sudden stop, right? About collaboration, partnership. And I think to attend to different seminars about it, that is how we can expose ourselves as ELT professionals in order to get new strategies and methods about it. So that's one. That's one of the many suggestions that I can offer, to attend to the different seminars and fora regarding ELT, the gatherings of ELT practitioners, in order for us to collaborate and talk in person with our colleagues in the field of English language teaching. And perhaps talks about matters which are important in delivering teaching about English.
Very interesting questions when we talk about English language teaching, because English language teaching in Indonesia, we're teaching English in a foreign language context, right? So, and sometimes more of these approaches and techniques which are more likely delivered from the Western countries in which English is taught in a second language context is quite different, and that's why it's that types of questions is really important. Yeah, sure.
That's true. I get the point. It's different because in the Philippines, English is ESL, English as a second language. It's too Western. I don't know in Indonesia, but one thing is for sure, in Indonesia, it's EFL, English as a foreign language. And if we talk about strategies, I believe it's also different with the kind of strategies that we offer in English language curriculum in the Philippines. But I mentioned it a while ago, the idea of globalization. It's important that we also adopt and learn the ways from Western culture while maintaining our identity as Indonesians, as Unram people. That's the point. So again, banking into the idea that it's our task as English language teachers to create activities that while we try our best, okay, to integrate Western aspect, okay, we also try to contextualize it in order for our students to appreciate learning. After all, if the students don't understand and know the context of what they are learning, they will never appreciate what we are doing or teaching to them. So that's very true. I think it banks into the idea of globalization. Adapting the idea of Western culture, Western ideas, learning, while at the same time still knowing our identity, your identity as Unram people.
And that's what the act is about, right? The third aspect that you mentioned earlier is to a partnership between the higher education with the local community and industries in order to, come up with a ways that is more localized in order to answer certain types of questions that Dr. Amin has been delivered to Dr. Ocampo. So, Dr. Tohir.
Yes. Okay. Can I have one more question?
Sure.
Okay. Thank
One
you.
last question.
Thank you for the time, and also thank you for Dr. Ocampo for such nice presentations. And it's such a big dream what you have presented, especially in the last part of your conclusions. I noticed that there's to be, I think that's need to be addressed to the decision maker. That's why I hope that Dr. Ocampo later on will be one of the Minister of Education in Philippines, so that you can give a contribution for the ASEAN countries in order to receive English language teaching in higher education of the ASEAN regions. And one of the points that I think still relates it to what Dr. Amin has asked you and what you have presented. And before the conclusion, I noticed talking about a holistic approach. Yeah, a holistic approach that you mentioned. There's no institution or no parties will be left behind. So, okay. So what do you think about a holistic approach in this case? What do you mean by a holistic approach? Could you please explain about this point? Thank you.
Yes. You know what? That is actually a dream of a teacher, right? To always establish and foster holistic well-being, holistic education, to foster holistic education to our learners. And once I say holistic approach or holistic well-being, that means not only banking to the technical side, not only cultivating, for instance, in English language, not only allowing them to be very good, to be fluent in speaking the English language, but at the same time fostering, teaching, the most important thing for me, which is character. You know, it's not just about teaching, delivering the technical aspects of learning. It's also about fostering and inculcating values to our learners. And that is, for me, the most important thing that we teachers should always do to our learners, regardless of the major or fields of concentration. And perhaps that's also the kind of approach which I did in my presentation, to look into the general aspect and trying to bank into the idea of BLT, which was, I think, as Dr. Amin, right, sir, is mentioned a while ago, that as if it's too general. I actually made it that way, and banking into ELT so that we can see that regardless of the fields of concentration, we can apply it. Okay, we can apply it to our respective classrooms. Again, going back to the holistic aspect, it's not just about teaching, cultivating the technical aspects of the learners, but at the same time fostering their characters, their values. Remember SKA, skills, knowledge, and attitude, the third one.
Thank you. So, Dr. Thohir, you still have any additional questions? Nope. Yeah, because we have a very limited time, so I think we will not ask audience to ask more questions. I'm so sorry, but if you still have questions, you can actually I think discuss with Dr. Ocampo, yeah, outside these presentations, maybe during lunch, yeah. Okay. All right, so thank you so much to all of the audience, to the speaker for a very wonderful presentation today. So if I, thank you. Yeah, so on behalf of the Universitas Mataram, I would like to express my deep gratitude to all of the audience who are still sitting at the back, okay, listening to the presentations and joining the presentation until the end, all right? So thank you to all of the committee as well who have prepared this event, and for all of your hard work. I know it's not an easy task to do. Okay, so thank you so much. And I think we are going to see you again in a different types of seminar or what is it called? General lecturer, okay, in the future. So thank you, and I wish you happy Eid. Ya, lupa tadi bilang ya. I forgot to tell you that we just celebrated our the biggest holiday in Muslim of the Muslims, the Eid al-Fitri. So happy Eid to all of you. Wish you a wonderful Eid this year. Thank you.
Okay, that is the end of the academic lecture series. Once again, I will say thank you to all the moderators and all the keynote speakers. And ladies and gentlemen, we have finally reached the end of our event today. But before I close, we will hand over the certificate to the keynote speakers, and the certificate submission will be showed up through the screen. Yeah, this is the e-certificate for Dr. Malin Balderas. I'm sorry, there's a misspelling for the name. It's using L, right? Okay, we will correct it later. Yeah, and the next is the e-certificate for Dr. Daryl Ocampo. Once again, thank you for visiting University of Mataram. And we all know that all of our keynote speakers today are very expert at their areas of studies. And hopefully their presence today and the information that they brought for us today can be such a strong boost that will motivate us to more deepen and strengthen our understanding and knowledge, especially at the sciences and education field. And on behalf of University of Mataram and the committee, I would like to deliver sincere appreciation and wish to convey the gratitude for all of your nice participation. Hope to see you soon in the near future. I wish you all a pleasant day. At least I say, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you and good afternoon.
Derap tegap harapan bangsa menuju Unram nan jaya. Utamakan penelitian, berdaya saing internasional. Derap tegap harapan pertiwi inovatif berdedikasi tinggi menuju perguruan tinggi negeri berbadan hukum. Laksanakan tridharma, bangun kerjasama, penuhi standar tata kelola, hasilkan sumber daya manusia, beriman dan bertakwa kepada Tuhan yang Maha Esa. Tegap harapan bangsa, derap tegap harapan bangsa, derap tegap harapan pertiwi, harapan pertiwi. Laksanakan tridharma, bangun kerjasama, penuhi standar tata kelola, hasilkan sumber daya manusia, dan bertakwa kepada Tuhan yang Maha Esa. Bangun kerjasama, penuhi standar tata kelola, hasilkan sumber daya manusia, beriman dan bertakwa kepada Tuhan yang Maha Esa. Beriman dan bertakwa kepada Tuhan